After lunch is always a tough spot, so we'll try to keep you guys awake. Let's do some brief introductions. It's great to be back with this group of people. And I'm Toby Koppel. I'm a partner at Mosaic Ventures. We're an early stage, Series A focused venture capital fund that was started this year, investing in startups all across Europe. So we're very lucky and privileged today to have three of some of the top practitioners in early stage investing. Saul Klein from Index, Gilad Novik from Horizons, and Christian Hernandez from White Star. So I think we're just going to maybe kick off with a very easy question, just so you can get to know the guys. Can you talk a little bit about your sort of personal investment philosophy and sort of how you evaluate investing in early stage businesses? You've kind of been doing this for many, many years, and so I think everyone has very different approaches, so it's always interesting to sort of hear individual perspectives. Maybe, Saul, you can start us off.
Sure. Thanks, Toby. So I guess, you know, one of the, I don't know how many entrepreneurs are in the room here. Okay, about half. So, you know, one of the things I think is really important from an entrepreneur's perspective is to be able to sort of understand the answer to the question that Toby just posed. I would argue that today there is no shortage of capital. In fact, particularly at early stage and arguably at seed, there's an abundance of capital, not just from investors, but from other options. So it's really important to understand the motivation of the person or the firm that you're working with. And I'd say, at least from an index perspective, it's really, really important to us that you have the ambition to build a company that is going to be worth $1 billion or more. Now, that doesn't mean that you know, being an entrepreneur that builds a company that is worth 50 million or 100 million is a bad thing. In fact, you can build great businesses that way. But I think at least if you are talking to a firm like Index, you need to believe that you want to, and it's not a given that you want to, and B, that you have a business idea in a market that is capable of creating a business that is that large, because that's the business that we're in terms of, you know, the funds that we manage and the ambition that we have and that our investors have for our funds. And that is not true necessarily if I would be investing in your company as an angel investor, but as a VC, or at least as a VC at Index, you know, that is something that's really important to us when we meet with entrepreneurs.
And maybe just a moment just on yourself and, you know, your own personal philosophy and how that might be different from some of the other folks at Index. You obviously have a very entrepreneurial background as well as an investing background. Yeah,
I mean, I'd say, you know, Index is a single partnership across sort of primarily investing out of Geneva, London, and San Francisco. So we've got offices in 3 locations. Most of our investments are happening out of London and San Francisco. I'd say as a group, we've got a very, very kind of consistent philosophy, and as I said, you know, really sort of looking to connect with entrepreneurs who are trying to build global businesses. And I was having a discussion earlier today that, you know, in some respects, European entrepreneurs are very, very well conditioned for building international businesses, because very few of the markets any of us operating in are big enough to sustain exceptionally large outcomes. That's not always true, but you know, we really believe that we're investing in an international opportunity here. The internet's 3 billion people now. It's no longer an English-speaking US internet. So we're really looking for, I'm looking for people who really buy into that opportunity and are looking to scale their businesses beyond a particular local market. They may want to prove it in a single market, but then, you know, really thinking about how they can take the business international.
Great, thanks, Saul. Gilad, you have, you know, come obviously from more of a technical background. Horizons is also quite a unique organization, being a foundation. Talk a little bit about kind of what kind of investment philosophy you've developed over the years, what you think makes you a good early stage investor.
Sure. So just a little bit about kind of a background. Horizon Ventures is the private investment arm of a gentleman called Li Ka-shing. Li Ka-shing is the richest guy in Asia. And the interesting thing is that a few years back, he decided to contribute a third of his wealth to the benefit of the world, and he established a philanthropic organization called the Li Ka-shing Foundation, who contributes money in the fields of health and educational projects. So one of the latest contributions was $130 million to the Technion University in Israel, and that money came out of the Waze exit. So that's the twist where we, Horizon Ventures, enter into the picture. So we are kind of a vehicle to create money for the Li Ka-shing Foundations. In terms of our focus, because it's kind of a unique vehicle, we tend to go for disruptive technologies. And when I say disruptive technologies like what Skype did for voice, Waze for navigation, Siri for personal assistant. So we try to find those unique, out-of-the-box type of technologies that we can take them to the next level. And that's what we try to focus. Any consumer technology that will bring an edge to each and every one of us on a day-to-day basis. In order to evaluate and try to identify which one of them fits us, we try to look into a very strong team, sets of intellectual property that company either have or can protect, and thirdly, of course, a unique solution.
Great. We're going to come on to talk about one or two of your companies in a moment. Christian, do you want to share your thoughts on the topic?
Sure. First of all, thanks for inviting us to be here. It's a great panel. Bit of background of where Whitestar came from, because that actually leads to the answer to the question. So until last year, I was at Facebook leading our platform team, scaling out across Europe. I'd been at Google before that, in a startup in the .com days. As an active angel investor, the biggest frustration that I had was actually, A, not having enough cash to fund all the companies that I wanted to fund, but B, the fact that at the angel round, a lot of these companies were actually not raising enough to be sustainable, right? 200,000 pounds, which meant that they're pretty much immediately going to be raising for the next round. And it was a combination of the lack of ambition sometimes from the entrepreneurs with the lack of access to the funding. And to Saul's point, that's actually changed significantly in the last 5 years. The depth of the angel ecosystems in London and Berlin and Tel Aviv, early stage funds like Mosaic, like Whitestar, Horizon, who takes very small bets but also very large bets. And what we want to be able to do is find entrepreneurs that have global ambitions. If you want to be the biggest in France, that's fantastic. There's other people who back you. It's not for us. We want somebody that understands that platforms like Facebook, like the iOS and Android platforms allow you to reach billions of users at scale. That there's actually cheap ways of doing that if you know how to mine the data to acquire the right user. And then the team itself has the technical chops to pull it off. In other words, so you have this level of delusion, if you will, of what you want to build, but then the technical chops to pull it off, create some IP, be defensible. And I think I probably see like a fashion tech startup every other week. And honestly, unless there's actually something massively defensible about that fashion tech startup, it's going to be a very crowded and competitive space. So when you come talk to us, at least think about A, your global ambition, B, the level of funding you need to reach that ambition, and then C, the fact that you can prove to me that you're delusional enough but have the technical chops to pull it off. Thanks.
Let me just pick up on one, I think, a common thread here. And it's interesting that the audience, I think, includes a lot of people from the UK, from Ireland. I think Italy is the third most highly represented country here. We have Lithuania, Croatia. We have a lot of smaller countries, as well as some larger ones. And you guys have all touched on the fact that you're looking for these very large outcomes. But if you look across most places outside, certainly the US and China, you haven't seen any Googles or Twitters or Facebooks that have been created. Why do you think that is, and what do you think needs to change before that will happen, if anything? So?
I mean, I think, certainly both you and I I've been around this business for almost 20 years now, not to give our age away. But what I've seen certainly in Europe is that maybe 10 years ago, the sort of the high watermark of a European entrepreneur's ambition was $100 million exits, or euro, pound, dollars. Today, a lot of entrepreneurs in Europe are aiming for that billion threshold, and increasingly more for a 10 billion threshold. So, the Silicon Valley ecosystem, which by and large, other than a few anomalies like, up in Seattle, have produced most of these, 50, 100, $200 billion companies, has been around for 60 years. The European Israeli ecosystem is 15 to 20 years old, and I actually think if you look at the last 12 months in Europe, literally every single month in the last 12 months, you've seen a European company raise over $100 million, and many times more, like Spotify over 200 million in their last round. You've seen companies exit either as IPOs for billions, either in the US, like Just Eat, Just Eat in Europe, but Criteo in the US, which you know well, King for $7 billion in the US, Mobileye for over $7 billion in the US, Market for $4.5 billion in the US, and even in London, we've had multiple multi-billion-dollar exits, plus you've had multi-billion-dollar M&A. So I think, if you'd said even 5 years ago that literally every single month you'd have this in Europe, people would have said you're crazy. And if you like, the entrepreneurial raw materials that are producing these outcomes are just getting bigger, better and better, stronger and stronger in every European market. So I think people's ambition level is raising, so it's coming. I think the total addressable markets for companies has increased orders of magnitude. 10 years ago, there were 300 million people on the internet. Now there are 3 billion. If you're selling enterprise, again, 10 years ago, you were selling to maybe 3,000, 4,000 customers. Now you're selling to, the Fortune 5 million. So I think the total addressable market's way bigger, ambition is way bigger, and it's going to come. I mean, I think in Europe, we've got several $10 billion private companies in the wings, and I would suspect, we're going to get our first $20 billion plus European outcome in the next 5 years. Or Israeli. I'm very bullish on that. But it's still, if you want to sort of build a $10 billion company out of the gate, China and the US are still the main markets to do that in.
That's some bold statements. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, I actually agree with Sol, and to add to that, I've been exploring different centers here in Europe, like London, Barcelona, and Berlin in the past few years, and it's all seems like you've got the right talents, you've got the good ideas, you've got good deliveries there, and it's a question of timing. It's just a question of timing. It will come. It's just a question of a few years.
Yeah, a bit of an echo chamber, but yes, obviously if you looked at it 10 years ago and you look at it today, just even start with the level of ambition from the get-go, right? And it's also looking at your peers. Has there been other billion-dollar companies that I can try to emulate or at least look up to? And therefore, because they're billion-dollar exits, where there was a cap table deep enough that some guy who was employee 100 walk away with a couple million to go de-risk and start up his own company, and where there are other angels that could support it, and then that, the Silicon Valley ecosystem is special because it's been around for some time, it's so dense. But I think the London ecosystem is fantastic. Berlin is quite unique. Israel is magical. I think by default, if you're in Israel, you're a risk taker, and the university system, everything seems to be there to kind of lead you to the path of creating businesses with quite successful M&A track records. So billion is no longer a question. I think Sol used to have a spreadsheet a couple years ago of the $1 billion exit. I'd love to see your spreadsheet of the $10 billion exits, actually.
Well, I think there are over 260 billion-dollar companies that we've, US and Europe and Israel now in the last 20 years. So, and Europe is definitely adding to the mix. So it's exciting times to be a founder.
We agree. That's one of the reasons we started Mosaic, to capitalize on this. So maybe just picking up again on something that was touched on. I forgot to mention Israel. Obviously, there's a huge contingent here from Israel today. If you were to pick one city, and now you have to pick only one city in Europe where you find it incredibly exciting today to sort of invest in an entrepreneur or team, what would that city be? Gilad?
Well, I'm a little bit biased, so I think Tel Aviv is still quite appealing in terms of technologies coming out of there, and one of the reasons is university. The second reason is actually experience of 3 to 4 years in the military service. So people actually come out with quite a lot of experience on a specific subject, and they can commercialize it and deliver kind of a technology into the consumer world, but not only. At the same time, valuations, when you look at valuations compared to other parts of the world, they are still reasonable.
Somebody called the Israeli military the most successful incubator in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I moved to London 9 years ago, and I'm now British, and I'm very proud to be a Londoner. And I think the city is magical because it's not about only tech. And I think sometimes when you go to the Valley or Seattle, it's a bit monochromatic in that regard. But the fact that you have the combination of financial industry and fintech, advertising powerhouses that are based here, some of the world's largest brands that are based here for ad tech, and then this depth of intellectual output from the universities, UCL and Imperial and Edinburgh and Cambridge and Oxford, which, to be fair, I think sometimes we don't leverage enough. And you combine that with, over the last 5 years, seed level investing has gone up 8-fold across Europe, and yet consistently the UK has maintained 30% of seed A and B rounds throughout that time. The density of money is here, the density of the angel ecosystem's here. So if I was de-risking my own startup, I'd probably do it in London, because if I wanted to stay in Europe.
Oh,
London.
London. You are biased. Do I have to?
Yeah, you have to
I don't
answer.
have to answer that question. Do I?
Well,
Moderator, I get to
you're in
decide.
London.
I'm in London? Okay. It's a very hard question to answer, as I told you guys. To pick, I mean, it is incredibly encouraging from my perspective. If you just look at the ecosystem that's been built in London in the last few years, it's clearly been built in Tel Aviv, it's building in Berlin, it's building in Stockholm. I was at Slush in Helsinki last week, 12,000 people at this event. Incredible energy, incredible number of ideas, great entrepreneurs. I mean, European, the 20-somethings and 30-somethings are, are embracing tech in a way. Certainly I've never seen them in my lifetime, and it's incredibly positive for everybody in this room.
I mean, to pick up on something Christian said, for the Dublin Web Summit, we did a bit of research on entrepreneurship and used the Facebook Ads API to look at how many people globally were interested in entrepreneurship. And I was totally shocked by the numbers, 55 million. And then we sort of sliced and diced it as a percentage of city population. And actually Dublin was the city, ironically, I mean, it wasn't just because of the, skewed because of the conference, but Dublin, actually when you look at cities and governments that have really sort of embraced the tech economy, I think probably second to Israel, tech as a percentage of GDP, Ireland is up there. But it's actually pretty surprising the cities where people are interested in entrepreneurship. I mean, Manila, Jakarta, all, by the way, as a percentage of the population ahead of San Francisco and New York. So I think what's challenging as an investor, but what's incredibly exciting is that entrepreneurship is truly like a mainstream global phenomena now. But where you actually build your business, I still think, to build and scale your business up, it's hard to do that outside of some of the main, tech hubs like San Francisco or London at this point.
Sure. Thanks, Saul. Let's just move on. Maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the things you find exciting. Maybe pick a theme that you're spending a lot of time on, Gilad, and share kind of your perspective with everyone.
Sure. So in the past 3-4 years, we were very focused into internet and mobile. We shifted a little bit in the last year, and we moved into food technologies. We try to find, again, disruptive technologies in the food industry. One of our latest investments is Impossible Foods, who reinvented the most common thing, which is hamburger. So they developed a hamburger that looks like a hamburger, feels like a hamburger, smells like a hamburger, and tastes like a hamburger, but it's actually made out of plants. So we are trying to find those unique technologies that will change our lives, maybe not in the next year or two, a little bit longer, but something that will definitely leave a big mark on our lives.
Christian?
So personally, I'm actually quite interested in the intersection of mobile data and kind of contextually aware applications. So people call it kind of mobile-enabled services. But the idea today, I can really remote control my life from my device, right? I can order the Uber car, change my Spotify playlist, get my food, get a maid, get my laundry, and book a massage without leaving this chair. Some of them are very gimmicky, but I think the idea of the computing device itself and kind of the sensors that it has, but actually more interestingly, the way it's connected to a massive parallel computing backend that could actually crunch data and actually give you that immediate relevance of what you need to do. And you guys have been quite active in that space for several years. So how does that actually make my life easier? How do I actually, as a consumer, do that, and how does that actually provide value? And if it provides value, am I willing to part with some of my money on behalf of that? It's actually really interesting seeing companies from Eastern Europe, actually in Berlin and Israel and New York, trying to tackle this from different perspectives. A bit too many maid services going around my mobile device right now, but I think in general the notion of the mobile device with data and computational power to make our lives better is something that is now no longer a question, it's actually a reality.
You want to answer or?
I mean, I think over the last 2 or 3 years, on a personal level, I've been very interested in how sort of physical devices and hardware get reinvented with sort of both connectivity and software, but also the ability to use crowdfunding platforms, to use production facilities, you know, be that in Asia or sort of rapid prototyping with 3D print, but really how sort of physical products are being reinvented with the sort of ubiquity of connectivity. So personally, that's been an area that I've probably spent a lot of time in the last 2 or 3 years. Going forward, I think some of the areas that I think are getting ready for prime time and I find very interesting, sort of AI, which I know Horizon have spent a bunch of time in. And I think, you know, VR, which I've seen promised for 20 years. You know, when you try Crescent Bay, the latest demo version of Oculus, I mean, it's both mind-blowing and really, really scary at the same time in terms of, you know, the potential and the challenges of mainstreaming this technology. So, yeah.
Right. Maybe just spend a minute talking about Kano. You've obviously dedicated a lot of time in the last year or more on Kano, which is, you know, a new generation of hardware startup. We saw from some of the demos downstairs quite a few people also working on building Internet of Things or hardware, next generation hardware businesses. Could you share some of your experience in some of the challenges of building a hardware company and what something you learned?
If those that don't know, this is a Kano. It's a computer that you put together yourself that costs $149, that comes with Bluetooth wireless keyboard, an operating system, Wi-Fi. Jonathan, I think from Kano, is going to be talking later on today. And you know, the thing that for me was just on a personal level interesting about Kano was I'd been in technology for 20 years and I had no idea how a computer was put together, and just, you know, the physicality of putting a computer together, and that being an on-ramp as a kid to your sort of gateway into a world where technology is ubiquitous was appealing to me. Trying to then get this made and sort of start to ship 10, 20, we've sold now I think 20,000+ units, was a really amazing learning experience because, hardware is really, it's not easy, and hardware plus software plus services is even more challenging. And I think, we've seen certainly in our portfolio with companies like Sonos or Anki, to make hardware attractive as an investment proposition, it's not just about making something. You have to make something that is connected, and you have to make something where the true value is not just in the physicality, but it's in the software and the services and the community that's built around it. So, between Kano, Rolly, which I think you guys are also investors in, Anki, Sonos, it's been a real learning experience for me. But again, what I find really exciting is when you have ubiquitous connectivity, every single physical device needs to be reinvented. Everything, from chairs to monitors to packaging. So I think we're just at the beginning of this wave, but having the experience now of actually sort of knowing what, a manufacturing supply chain is in reality rather than, just the 140 character summary has been a humbling experience. So it's been really interesting. Yeah.
Right. Can we take maybe one or two questions? We have, there's a gentleman in the third row here.
Thanks very much, very illuminating. I was going to ask you more about what you do with the companies that you've invested in. I think in the UK we tend particularly to invest in companies, get them to a certain stage and then focus on trade sales or some kind of simple exit. And the fashion for taking companies public has been really out of sorts for the last decade or so. Is it possible to focus more on driving companies to be public and keeping the chief executives and the leadership team in place so they raise their bar, raise their ambition and make it to $1 billion?
Elad, do you want to try that one, or Christian?
I was going to pass it on to Sol.
So you're the spokesperson.
I mean, I think we've always believed, as I'm sure every investor on this panel has, that money is not enough. You have to be able to provide entrepreneurs with more than money, with network, with insight, with expertise. Over the last 3 years at Index, we've really tried to institutionalize that as a service offering. So, whenever an entrepreneur takes an investment from Index, they're able to plug in now to a network of 140 companies in 39 cities, 20 countries. Those companies employ 25,000 people. We've tagged the top 2,000 people at those companies, segmented them by area of expertise. So there are 200 CTOs in our CTO forum. We have a product group. We have a design group. We have a finance group. So for us, we're trying to act as a gateway to help entrepreneurs save time by being able to get some of the questions that they have every day quickly answered, either by their peer group or by people from within our network. We've seen in Silicon Valley, this is effectively table stakes now for the best funds, and we believe that Silicon Valley has sort of led the way in the thinking in this area for 20, 30 years, and we think capital is increasingly a commodity. There's not a deal, I think, that any of us want to be in where we don't have to compete. We're not just sitting back with checkbooks saying, come through our offices. We're out there trying to be in the best deals with the most ambitious entrepreneurs, and we know to be considered by those entrepreneurs, we have to be on top of our game, and we have to be able to offer a lot more than just capital. And I think, you know, the new breed of European venture, you know, which these guys demonstrate, or global venture, which Horizon do, is, you know, everyone gets that. And smart entrepreneurs now know that if you want the best chance of success, you know, there are a cohort of investors who are really going to go the extra mile for you.
And I'll just add to that, and adding to that, which I agree with 100%, but I think also it's, you know, we filter for entrepreneurs who are, I call it missionaries. They're not mercenaries. They're not really thinking about how do I exit. They're really thinking about doing something for the rest of their life that is going to change the world. And it's filtering for those types of people who, no matter what's thrown at them, no matter what changes come, you know, of course they would like to take some liquidity at some point to de-risk themselves, but that's really not the driving factor. And so trying to find those people and then get out of the way is almost, you know, more important than anything else that at least we can do as investors. That's the way we look at our role. We have money, and then if we have a brain as well that can help, that's nice, but it's a bonus.
Just to add one sentence, from our point of view, it's not only the money. I think the money is the last thing that is important in that case. What we try to bring is actually value in terms of our connections, in terms of who we connect the companies with. So in terms of our strategy, we've got like 3 strong legs. One of them is our operational groups within the group and within the world. So think of the Hutchison Group, which own 13 mobile operators and many other businesses all over the world. So if there is a synergy between a startup to Hutchison, of course we make the connection, and much more than that. A second leg is we see ourselves kind of a gateway to China, so we can connect a lot of the startups with our operational teams in China, called Tom.com, which is one of the biggest content providers in China, with more than 100 million downloads of Skype over there, branded Tom Skype. So this is a big generator for user base. And the third leg is our portfolio companies in the US, so companies like Facebook, Spotify, and many others.
Thank you, Gilad. Thank you, Saul. Thank you, Christian. That was a great panel. Thank you, everyone, for listening.